Today's New York Times has an article that harks back to George Tiller 20 years ago, the infamous late-term abortionist in Wichita, Kansas, whose one of whose associates opened an abortion clinic to replace him, as we knew would happen after he was shot and killed. And George Tiller really was associated with two of the biggest mistakes the pro-life movement could possibly have made. With number one, with Operation Rescue. Operation Rescue was a wonderful movement from the heart. It was the people involved were wonderful people. They were willing to make great sacrifices to attempt to block the entrances to abortion clinics. But from a strategic point of view, it made no sense at all. There was never any possibility that pro-lifers were going to beat the federal government, that the Justice Department was going to say, oh well, look at all these thousands of pro-lifers who are blocking abortion clinics. Let's just close down abortion clinics or outlaw abortion clinics. No, what happened was the pro-life movement, in very large numbers, ended up in prison, and marriages were ruined, and jobs were lost, and after all the chaos and the turmoil, all that really happened, and people point to some lives being saved by women being turned away from abortion clinics by blocking the entrance. There's a great deal of evidence that a high percentage of those women just went to another abortion clinic. That it just moved the problem around. It didn't stop the problem. And so the pro-life movement got a lot of very bad press because the press mischaracterized pro-life activism as violent, which of course it wasn't, but there are a lot of far-left political activists, some who were violent gay and lesbian activists for their causes, were enlisted by pro-abortion organizations to wade into Operation Rescue crowds and scuffle with the rescuers, and then the press would report that as Operation Rescue blockade turns violent, as though it was the pro-lifers who were causing the violence. And this caused us no end of difficulty in fundraising. A lot of donors fell away because they didn't want to be associated with violence, and they fell for the lie that it was the pro-lifers causing the violence. And then, of course, the second big tragedy, it was a tragedy. People who called themselves pro-life, they weren't, began to kill abortionists. And George Tiller, of course, was involved in that as with one of the victims of one of the attacks on abortion providers, quote unquote. So, unfortunately, the pro-life movement often has had difficulty figuring out where the point of attack should be for activism. And by attack, I mean the focus of pro-life activism. And pro-lifers focus on the symptom. The abortion clinic is the symptom. It's not the problem. The problem is, right now, at this moment, roughly 2/3 of the American people think that a first trimester baby, which is when 90% of abortions are performed, is a blob or a clump of cells, that it's not really a baby. And until we solve that problem, until we convince people that the embryo and early fetus really are developmentally worthy of rights of personhood, we don't have any hope of solving any of these other abortion-related problems at which we're focusing. And the problem here is not merely changing the law. You can buy abortion pills online. You don't even have to see a doctor. It's totally unregulated. You don't have to go to an abortion clinic. So blockading clinics, it doesn't matter if women can buy these pills online. Changing the law, I mean, of course we need to work to change the law, no doubt about that, but we need to recognize that that's not the entirety of the problem, and maybe not the main problem we solve. The main problem is hearts and minds. We have to convince the American people the baby really